Welcome to Now What, our show with Miss Jen, that's me. We're going to be having a topic today that is all about how stress affects executive function, what that means for educators, and most importantly, now what do we do about it in the trauma-sensitive classroom, whether we're talking about meeting the needs of youth in early childhood settings and their families, elementary age learners, middle school or high school students, and even adults too. I'm Ms. Jen Alexander, your trauma-informed author, educator, consultant, coach, and trainer. I have with us in the studio Jennifer Dickey and Lori Ferris today. So excited to have both of you with me. I'm going to tell our listeners a little bit about both of you. Jennifer Dickey is a faculty member in the education department at Wartburg College. She currently teaches courses in both the reading and special education endorsement strands. Prior to her time at Wartburg, she held a variety of roles in the education field, including classroom teacher, instructional coach, gifted and talented specialist, and academic language therapist, providing specialized instruction to dyslexic learners. She has passion and expertise in designing supports for divergent thinkers. She is also the founder of Lotus Cognitive Solutions Group, where she provides executive function coaching to children and adults with ADHD, dyslexia, and other learning differences. When she's not working, she is busy cheering on her 7th grade daughter and 8th grade son in softball and baseball. Welcome, Jennifer. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We also have Lori Ferris with us. We're so lucky to have you as our special guest today. Lori is the Iowa Head Start Association's executive director, and we're so delighted to have you here joining in on the conversation. Head Start and all of the programming that goes with Head Start is extremely important in communities across the nation. We know that there are risks to your programs right now, and it is so important that we are speaking about the importance of the work that you do and maintaining the resources and support so that you can keep doing all of the wonderful things that you are doing in our communities. We look forward to having you join our conversation, bringing that early childhood focus to some questions as we think about what do executive function supports look like for not only learners in early childhood settings, but also the adults who are serving them or caring for them at home too. I always like to start with a bit of a check-in. And so what we're going to do is have a moment to look at the slide here. In fact, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so we can take you off of there. And what I want to invite you to do is to just take a moment to look at the photo to see if there's something in the photo that goes with how you're doing today. And for those of you who are watching the show, please think about this for yourself and feel free to leave a comment if you'd like to. For instance, as I look at this, I'm seeing like just kind of a little tree in the background there that reminds me of one of the ways I'm coming into this space today. I'm just so ready for this conversation and not to be center stage, which I have been as we begin the discussion here, but to really listen to both of you and see what great things come from us talking together today. Jennifer, how about you? Do you see anything in the photo that goes with how you're doing?
I love this picture. So many things here, but I think I'm going to choose the mountain off in the distance as summer gets underway. Oh my goodness, my to-do list of things that I want to accomplish during the summer are sometimes overwhelming. And I think it's a good reminder. This looks like a safari or something. And so maybe just enjoying every step along the way as I approach that mountain rather than just trying to run to the top of that mountain and wear myself out. So the journey.
Yeah. I'm just taking that all in. That makes a lot of sense to me too. Lori, how about you?
Oh, as I'm looking at this, I see the elephant kind of right in the middle, and I'm just imagining that is the mother elephant. And I kind of feel like I am in that protective, mothering mode most of the time. So with my job and Head Start, I feel like I'm in that protective phase and being that voice for programs. across the state. And as we face stresses related to things at the federal level and the state level, and just that protective mode. And then at home, I wear that mother hat, grandmother hat all the time too. So I just envision that elephant being that protector and voice for the other elephants in that drawing.
Well, I know you well enough to know that you're steadfast in your leadership and how you are not only holding space for the policy decisions and the risks that are happening right now, but you're taking good care of people too. And I think Jennifer and I both can understand how that can be a lot to hold sometimes.
Yeah. I take my job very seriously. So yeah, very invested.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Yeah,
Jennifer, thank you for being here with us too. We're already showing up in a brave way and talking truth about where we're at and what we need to keep doing this important work. I want to invite our listeners and people who are viewing the show to introduce yourself, comment in the chat, and join us in nurturing and challenging each other to grow. That's the only way we can be relentless for school change together. And that's what this work is all about. With that in mind, let's jump right in and talk about executive function. Jennifer Dickey, you and I wrote a quick guide about one type of executive function, working memory in particular. So it's a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Can you just start with us and tell us a little bit about what executive function is, and specifically, what is working memory and why does it matter so much in the work that we all do?
Yeah, I'd love to. So let's start with that broad term, executive function skills. And I think we can think of these skills as our brain's control center, the CEO of our brain, so to speak. And these are a group of higher level mental processes that really help us manage ourselves and the way we interact with our world. And you might think of them as more upstairs brain skills, things that help us with self-control, attention, focus, even shifting our focus to transition smoothly from one task to the next, and working memory, which is really the highlight of what we're going to talk about today. And, working memory is a star player on this executive function team, but it's not something people talk about very often. It's kind of the unsung hero of the executive function skills. And it's our mind's sticky note, if you will. So if we're processing information, it's that sticky note that allows us to hold that information for a specific period of time while we process or manipulate that information in order to carry out a task or to problem solve. And it's pretty a bedrock skill to all the other executive function skills. And we use it to follow multi-step instructions. We use it to help us with reading comprehension or to solve mathematical equations, remembering classroom rules and routines, and applying what we've learned to new situations. So you're going to see working memory seep into almost every single thing that we do in the classroom and out of the classroom as well.
I often think of executive function as, this is probably a little bit oversimplified, so feel free to add to this, but anytime we're going to do something that has multiple steps to it, that there's all these different processes that we have to be able to tap into to be successful in whatever that goal is. So if I wrote about in Building Trauma Sensitive Schools, if I'm going to write a chapter in a book, I need to know what I'm going to write about. I need to know my content. I need to know how to write. But then there's all of these other processes that help me actually get the job done, because the skill and the knowledge aren't actually enough to have that chapter written. Is there anything that you would add to that or explain differently?
No, I think that's a really great way to explain it. I always use metaphors to talk about it too. And, we talked about it being a sticky note, but you can even, our working memory is a fixed capacity for the time being. And so if you think about it as a nightstand next to your bed, you can only fit so many things on your nightstand before things start falling off. And so as you were talking about writing your book, that's a complex multi-step task. So if you already had too much clutter on that nightstand, you'd be dropping pieces, making it next to impossible for you to be successful in completing that task.
Well, that leads me right to the next question then. Let's talk about how stress affects that nightstand. How would you explain to folks what is the role of stress in terms of our capacity for working memory at any given time?
So when kids are experiencing big stresses or little stresses, to be honest, whether it's temporary or it's ongoing trauma, and adults can no longer easily access those upstairs brain functions. So this means tasks regarding our working memory, regarding our executive function skills become much, much harder for us. And even if we have those skills, if we don't have access to them, it becomes a case of I can't right now, rather than I don't want to do something. And I think understanding that shift helps us make that lens change from one of frustration or bewilderment with ourselves or with the students we're supporting to one of more compassion and understanding, knowing it's a skill we can help kids support, build, or even scaffold until they're in a more regulated state.
It's such an important point that you bring up, because just earlier today, I was working with some technology and I was trying to sign into an app on one device. It sent a code to a different device, and I needed to hold that number in my mind to be able to get into the app, all while someone was waiting on me to get into the app to do something so they could do something in the app. So my stress level was up. I carry a significant amount of stress just on kind of any given day, to be honest with you, both personally and professionally. But then I had the stress of that other person waiting on me, and I was trying to hold that number, and it was really difficult. I had to look back several times, and then I got mad at myself, worrying that I was making that other person wait. So I think that's such a powerful way to think about it for ourselves, of how pressure, anxiety, stress can make working memory even more difficult. And of course, there's other factors that influence it too. Lori, do you think that working memory is something that affects folks in an early childhood setting? Even, for instance, if you think about caregivers, staff, educators, or family members, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that for instructors, definitely their working memory can be impacted by stress. When you look at just putting lesson plans together, there's a lot of different steps to that and different considerations as they pull that information together. And I think their capacity to really reach in and pull that sticky note out is impacted with, as different stress layers come into play. So, that's just one example related to educators and how they're impacted with that.
Definitely. And I've worked with several directors of early childhood settings over the years, and there's also so much to learn once you're on the job, whether you're in an educational setting or more of a childcare setting, whatever it may be, or you're in the job and have the responsibility of helping young learners grow and develop and flourish and connect in healthy ways. And that's true for any of us as an educator, to be honest with you. There's so much we're learning once we're on the job. And then you add the technology pieces and how you do certain things within the system. And to hold all of that you're trying to apply, that you're learning in a time when you're facing your own personal stressors or the stress of the work itself, we can see working memory falter for sure. Let's talk a little bit about what kinds of supports can help youth, but also adults with their working memory needs. Jen, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I think everything Lori said, I was just envisioning myself when I was a classroom teacher, and the sweet week before school started, and I had all of these great ideas, and I was lesson planning, and these lesson plans were pristine, and I couldn't wait to get started. And then 32 humans showed up at my classroom door, plus we got new curriculum, plus tech problems, plus parent emails, and all of a sudden that cognitive overload made it really difficult for me to successfully carry out things that, as a tenured teacher, I knew how to do well, but all of a sudden I was in cognitive overload. My nightstand was overflowing with things, and I was missing things, and pieces were getting dropped. And so because of that, because of the role we play as educators, I feel like we have, even though typically teachers have pretty strong executive function skills, I think we can also have deep empathy and compassion for the students we're supporting. And so I think that's really important. I think it's important to start with validating their emotions. I always hear Miss Jen in my head. I notice that it seems difficult for you to start your math work today. I noticed that you seemed upset when you came in from recess. I wonder. So I always hear Miss Jen in the back of my head. So I like to start with just validating emotions and giving kids space to talk about those. I think it's important that we help share that cognitive load with kids and caregivers too. I talk to a lot of parents who are so flabbergasted that their child cannot successfully complete that bedtime routine. It doesn't change every night. It's change into your PJs, brush your teeth, wash your face. It's like 4 or 5 things. And yet the child somehow seems to get step 1 done, but then lost after that. And so the way we can share that cognitive load, even for routine tasks in the classroom or at home, is to make those tasks visual and tactile. Even when it's like the same 5 things every night, it is so powerful to take something abstract that's here into something that's tangible and physical that I can see and follow. And that's really important for us to do with kids.
I think sometimes as adults, there might be some hesitancy to do a support like that because it's this idea of, well, kids need to do what we tell them to do. Like there's a time and place to be understanding of people's feelings, to acknowledge and have empathy for those feelings. And there's a time to follow directions, right? But what I'm hearing you say, Jennifer, and what I know from our work together and the writing that we've done too, is that once we understand how working memory affects behavior from a brain and nervous system standpoint, it helps us see that not following directions may not be not following directions at all. It's about not being able to hold what that next step is. It's a working memory problem, potentially, not a following directions problem, and certainly not a lack of focus problem either. Because, for instance, when I couldn't remember that number earlier today for that app, telling me that I need to follow directions isn't going to help me remember it better. And telling me to focus isn't going to help me remember it better either. And so I needed something different. And you're talking about a visual support. So could you give an example of what that might look like in the bedtime routine that you just gave?
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that being a digital or a Velcro checklist where your child would go through and they're clicking it off as they go. I mean, kids will probably be more responsive to a digital checklist because it somehow adds to the motivation and interest and intrigue. But a paper checklist that's laminated that they could whiteboard marker, or there's Velcro as steps are completed, would be equally as effective. I've seen parents actually write on the bathroom mirror with a dry erase marker, or kids write on the bathroom mirror, 1, 2, 3. Here's what I got to do. Check, check, check. So again, just offloading it. And the goal isn't that they need this support forever. It's a scaffold until we can more adequately build that skill.
Let's think about the classroom now. Let's think about whether it's an elementary age student, a middle school learner, a high school learner, and then we'll get to early childhood in a minute because it's going to look a little different in an early childhood setting. But let's start with elementary, middle school, high school. Can you give us a couple of examples of what working memory supports might look like in the classroom? And then I have one I would love to share too.
Sure. So I think it's important when we're doing complex multi-step tasks with students that we're breaking that task down into micro tasks for our students. Some students might need mini micro tasks too, where they're completing, and maybe they don't even see the entirety of the task. We're focusing on a couple steps because we don't want to overwhelm. Working memory is closely aligned with task initiation too. So if we only see that first micro step that seems doable, or even setting a time parameter to it, we're going to start your intro paragraph, that first sentence of your intro. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just write just that first sentence. And sometimes that's all kids need. It's just that entry point into the project that seems doable, it seems manageable, and I know I can be successful in writing one sentence. So I think we have to help. Again, we're offloading some of that cognitive demand, and helping give them access to what we know they can be successful at.
And I think we can totally pair that with the visuals like you're talking about, and then cue to those steps too. So I think sometimes even for adults to know what's their first step to cue a learner, they can get kind of dysregulated in those moments, not remember quite what to apply. And so if they know what to say in that moment, to go to the first step and to say, it looks like you're having trouble on step one, if that's the step they haven't started. So instead of saying, you remember, you got to do your work, it's time to get started, or here's where you're supposed to do this, say, it looks like you're having trouble with step one. Look here, here's step one. You get started there, I'll come back and check on you.
And it doesn't have to be complex, right? And it's so interesting that you mentioned writing. You are a writer, and yet you feel how complex and how daunting it can be to start a writing project. This is so true for kids. And sometimes caregivers, it can feel so frustrating at home because you know you have to get to baseball practice in 30 minutes. So one thing you can do, again, using a timer or time, bringing your child into the conversation. We need to write a paragraph about a time you faced an obstacle. All right, so we're going to write for 2 minutes. How much do you think you can write in 2 minutes? I don't know, maybe 2 lines. I think you can write 2 lines too. Highlight the margins of those first 2 lines. Highlight the end of that last line. So interesting. Here is where you think you can get. This is your goal for yourself in 2 minutes, that you can write to the end of this highlight. Let's see how you do. And then we can adjust our goal for the next 2 minutes. So visual, manageable.
Visual and manageable. Powerful. And now those are 2 words that can be hooks for us to help people think about working memory skills. Let's talk now about early childhood. And Lori, please jump in at any point with questions or things you're thinking of. I don't want to put you on the spot, and I don't want to overlook your expertise either.
Yeah, speaking to visual supports, they're so important in the early childhood classroom because, so often the children, they aren't able to read yet. And I think that the more visual supports you can have for children in the early childhood world, it really just, lowers stress level, and it gives that opportunity for children to be successful, to get through certain process steps if they can refer to the visual without having that adult in the classroom remind them. And I think that speaks to even the nighttime routine, right? If the children can look to that without being reminded, it lowers the stress for the parent and the child. I know as a parent, when I'm having to remind kids over and over again, my stress level goes up, but having those visual supports and really gives them the opportunity to succeed. So the visual supports in the classroom, they're even good for our educators. So we encourage them as they're learning, especially our newer staff, to come up with transition options as children move from different activities. If they put visual supports up for themselves, because we all know that those classrooms can be stressful, and so that impacts their ability to go back and find that sticky note and pull it forward and pull things forward that they know they just can't retrieve it. So those supports, those visual supports for the staff are also very important as well.
One of my favorite structures for early childhood folks, but it can be for older learners too, is the first then structure. And you talked about transitions, and to have first, you could even have the word first and then a picture showing what we're going to do first and then what comes next. And you're right, it's that give support for folks who might not be readers yet. And we have learners who have all different capacities in terms of their language development too, or they're an English language learner and may not speak, their first language may not be the same language that their teacher is speaking, for instance. And so those visuals can help with that comprehension, with that working memory, but they also boost independence, because if a learner can look to that and follow those steps that are in the visual, then they're doing it themselves. And we know how important that is for confidence and sense of self in terms of development too.
Definitely.
Let's talk a bit about family caregivers. So whether we have parents of young learners, of any other age of learner, what might be some needs, Jennifer, that go with working memory supports that family caregivers may benefit from?
Yeah, great question. I think, again, just acknowledging that lens shift from I won't do that to I can't do that is important. Acknowledging that, our own emotions can become escalated when we're fighting the same battle every night at bedtime or with homework. I also just want to say, this is a little bit off task, but I also want to say that I feel like early childhood educators are actually working memory maestros, because I see so many early childhood educators teach a skill or a multi-step task through song and movement. And I actually don't think there's anything more powerful than that. And I feel like I still remember the capitals of South America because my teacher taught it through song and movement. So, gosh, I guess we could all take note from the ECE world and integrate that into elementary, into middle school, high school, even higher education. I know my college students would benefit from having movement and lyric to help retain and process steps. So I think that's really powerful. That's probably something we could integrate at home too. If you have a little and you have a bedtime routine song, or that's how my daughter learned how to spell her name. We chose a 9-letter name for her, which was challenging for a 3 and 4-year-old to learn. So we came up with a song that she would repeat to herself to help her work her way through that. So I guess that's a piece of advice for families. Tap into that ECE world, take note from them.
And that when we're doing that, we're not holding kids back. We're not lowering the expectations. I think that becomes a fear that if we provide these kind of supports, that we're coddling kids or we're not preparing them for the real world, if you will. But I have working memory supports around me all day, from my phone to literal sticky notes, and all kinds of other things too. And that the more we can teach kids about their brains, their unique brains, and their needs related to that, then they can advocate for what they need. They can help create a world that actually supports all of us in varied ways. And the more supports that are there, the more options available, the more choices that we can tap into, the more successful we are all going to be. I love it that you brought up music and movement. It's just huge, huge. I want to talk a bit about all of the stress that family caregivers can be under. I know as an early career teacher, there were times that I felt frustrated that maybe a parent didn't follow through with turning such and such a thing in, or follow all the steps to be successful in having their child ready for whatever it might be. And to really stop and think about all the worries, all the dysregulation, all the needs that adults are carrying in the world right now. We can think of ourselves and what we're carrying, for almost everyone, it's a lot. And of course, different groups of people are facing more vulnerabilities because of the harm and the trauma that's being enacted on groups of people. And when I think of migrant families right now and the stress that they must be carrying in relation to immigration policies and how those are being enacted, and then the fear of even sending their child to school, let alone all the things and getting all of the things in on time. And so I think we have to recognize that any family, any adult can be under traumatic stress and is under traumatic stress at any given point in time. And that it's our responsibility as educators and people who are here for families to provide working memory supports to our staff and to our families all the time. It's just a given that it's there, because even if folks don't need it, the fact that they know that it's there if they do need it and can rely on it is a good thing. So do you have any specific ideas, Jennifer, about what educators can do to be supportive of families' working memory needs?
That's such a great question, especially you're mentioning all these big, big challenges that feel so, the power distance feels really far away for all of us. And so some of the strategies that I'm going to suggest certainly feel almost inconsequential to some of the things that you brought up. So I don't want to minimize those big stressors, but I think helping families feel seen and heard, validate emotions, right? We do that for our students, and we need to do that for parents and families too. And I think when we can lean in with curiosity instead of, the blame game, or feeling frustrated with families for missing people, I think we need to genuinely lean in and ask questions. How can I support you? Can I buddy you up with another parent who's maybe experienced this before? I think about families transitioning from elementary to middle school and how scary that transition is, especially if we have a child who thinks and learns differently. Can I offload some of that stress for you? Can I pair you with a buddy who's been there, done that a little bit? So I think we need to proactively make those connections. That's what we're all seeking. We want that connection. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. In the classroom, we do brain breaks for kids. It's like mental hygiene for me and for my students, and it is so necessary. And so, reminding families to take that time for themselves and seeing what resources are there in our community that maybe could help parents take that moment, that 20, 30 minutes to themselves. Does our school offer after school or before school clubs, things like that? Um, in the guide we wrote, we talked about ampersand cards, and it seems simplistic, but it's incredibly powerful. And sometimes it's getting that fear on paper. Our ampersand cards, we use index cards. And whatever it is we're struggling to accomplish, we put it on paper, we write it out. So maybe it's, I'm afraid to ask questions. I am afraid that if I ask questions, it makes me seem like I don't know what I'm doing or not good at my job. Okay, so you've got that there. It's important. And here's where the ampersand comes in. Yes, I'm acknowledging that gap or frustration or something I'm not feeling successful at. And on the back, I have things I can do about that. I can ground myself through meditation. I can go for a walk. I can take my family to here in Cedar Falls, the Woods Lake, and we can walk around and get grounded in nature. I can practice taking deep breaths. And so, even though it seems really simple, sometimes having that physical reminder, that acknowledgement of a fear or something that feels out of our control, and then 3 to 4 things on the back that can help us process that hard can be pretty empowering.
Love the ampersand cards. And there's so many different ways we can use them. The possibilities truly are endless. And I think we can combine that idea also with part of what you're talking about, Jen, is almost anticipating the stress that's coming and having the steps right there for folks. But it could even be, like you mentioned, having that buddy, could even be having on a card, whether it's an ampersand card or not, Who are the 3 people I feel safe to ask a question to? Like if I'm a person who's worried about immigration status, who are my 3 go-to people that I can trust to ask my question honestly with, knowing I have somewhere to go with that. But I think it's also the power of almost inviting a pause in what we ask for families too. So can we put our asks of them in 3 steps? Here are the 3 things we need from you. Boom, 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 and a visual. And here's how you get it turned in. So instead of here's what we need from you right now, parent, and do it and hand it to us, here's the card that says these are the 3 things. Take it with you. And then they can make decisions about how to do those 3 things and have their person to call if they need to. Because I think it's unfortunate how observant, and really unfortunate isn't even a strong enough word. It's tragic how hypervigilant families are needing to be right now to be safe, and how important it is for us as educators to be aware of that, so we're not adding to that stress, but we're helping folks access supports and be able to make decisions and have those steps right there in case they get activated in their trauma response or stress response during that conversation. Then they have the steps later that they can go back to and follow through with. Lori, are there any other questions that you're thinking of as we go here?
I did have a thought just related to the early childhood aspect of it and Head Start. Often our families have added layers of stress that many other families may not, related to food insecurity and, barriers to transportation. And so I think that definitely impacts their ability to that memory barrier. So building that trust with their, the teachers, building it with their families, and taking that judgment away when maybe they don't turn something in, or they're having, a hard time even getting their child to school on time, which is just a reality sometimes with our kiddos and families. So just knowing that their teacher is a safe space, that communication with that teacher is safe, and that if they need to ask a question again, if they didn't hear it the first time, if they didn't see the reminder that came home in the backpack, that it's okay to reach out and to their teacher or the staff in the classroom and ask those questions again. So just a thought there.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so important. And I think that is a huge piece of the hurdle, is to be able to recognize that, like we do for learners, it's not necessarily that the parent won't do it, that it could be a can't in the moment, and that we don't know all the things they're holding. And we don't have to know all the things they're holding to be able to give them the supports that they need. We can assume that we have families who are holding a lot of stress for whatever reason, and we can repeat directions, we can simplify them, we can put them in visual form, and like you're talking about, we can be approachable and caring and supportive instead of being judgmental. And I think one of the things that we often do when we perceive that someone needs support is that we pile on resources. I know there were times as a school counselor I had that thought, well, I'll just give them all the resources I can think of. Well, for any one of us who's experiencing overwhelm, all the resources in the world is just another kind of thing that you have to sift through and figure out and do the work of. But to say, you know what, I have 2 resources to start with. Here's why someone might lean into this one. Here's why someone might want to think about this one. Is there one of them that you might want to learn more about? And if you want more ideas, let me know, I've got them. But even to have that in a visual form, right? To have that on a card or a piece of paper. I had a list of things, and I would then circle the 2 that I thought, if I were in your shoes, these might be the 2 I would consider. But don't hesitate to go to those 2 people or 3 people on your list that we talked about that you trust, to ask them what they think too. More is not always better. Simplifying things and providing options in a way that's not overwhelming is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I I thought I would share a quote from our guide, Jennifer. It doesn't take much stress to overload working memory. Many family caregivers are stressed, so plan to support their working memory needs. We don't have to be in a trauma response to have working memory affected. And so as we think about what we do for all families, many people will benefit from the supports. Any other questions that either of you want to share or bring up?
I guess, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a fun way to develop working memory skills at home that most all families have access to are games. If you can play games with your children where they maybe have to hang on to information as they make decisions. I mean, you could do games with a simple deck of cards. Those are really impactful ways to develop that skill, to build that skill. And the benefits are, as we've talked about today, pretty significant. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It does not have to be complex. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of materials. Use the things you have at home. Even making a grocery shopping list for your child and then reading them. All right, I want you to we're in the produce section. We need celery, carrots, and apples. Can you remember them? And go get them. Those are great ways to keep building that skill.
I'm glad you brought that up because we've been talking about working memory supports, and this is not to say that we want to overlook the importance of developing and kind of stretching learners' capacities for working memory. We want to do both. So like anything, there's kind of this comfort zone that we have. There's this growth zone where we can be challenged and we can expand our skills. And then there's the overwhelm zone. So when we're talking about supports, we want to keep people out of being overwhelmed, and we want to keep them comfortable at times, but also other times challenging to grow those skills too, because the capacity for working memory can change. It's affected by stress, and our developmental capacity for our learners can grow too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a fixed skill. So we have opportunity for growth.
Lori, I think you were going to say something too.
Yeah, I was just wondering what type of professional development might, either of you or both of you suggest that might be helpful for early childhood staff members that could benefit them to help support families with this type of challenge.
It's a great question. I think every educator would benefit from understanding, having a greater understanding of the stresses that different families may be experiencing. Not that it's our business to be digging up people's histories of trauma. We don't need to know their specific stories to be able to be supportive of them, but a training that helps people deepen their understanding of the types of stressors that families are carrying. And then what are the kind of do's and don'ts, the practical ways that every educator of any age learner can do to be supportive of learners and also family members. And there's so many practices that we can embed into the rhythm of how we do all the things that we do that can benefit families. And I think a lot of schools have come a long ways in understanding the basics of trauma, the power of relationships. And I think a lot of educators need more support in how do we really help people with some of these big behaviors, and how do we support families who are struggling with the dysregulation that might be driving some of these big behaviors too. And that takes more than just understanding the power of relationship. It takes skills on our parts as professionals. So I think that learning is really important. And along with that, what does it really mean to be safer and more compassionate in the support for adults and for family members? And I have a couple of things to share actually that I think can help folks whether they attend a training or not. I want to give one kind of thing that people can do now. So one would be, we have more tips in our quick guide that Jennifer Dickey and I wrote, supporting students' executive function skills in the trauma sensitive classroom, focusing in on working memory. You'll get lots of lots more understanding of what working memory is, how difficulties may show up, what you can do about it in the classroom. And there are lots of examples of those ampersand cards that you can access too. Jennifer, do you want to talk about a couple more books? And then I have something else I want to share that can help people help families too.
You bet. I think, Lori, as we start to see executive function skills really impact the way the students we support and how they interact in our classrooms, executive function skills are oftentimes at the center of some of the can'ts. And so even as a staff, Smart but Scattered is written by Dawson and Guar, and they're kind of the godfathers of all things executive function skills. And they have a great website. And if you just Google Smart but Scattered, they have different profiles. So you can take as an adult, or for young children as young as preschool, you can take a questionnaire and kind of hone in on which executive function skill do we feel like we're struggling most with, either as a staff. So is it time management in our building that feels really difficult? Is it emotional regulation? All right, so let's gather our data, and now let's lean into that and get your hands on if it is emotional regulation. Because of the many, many stresses and challenges we're facing in education right now. Let's lean into that, and let's find some accessible resources that we can read, almost like not a book study, but just as a topic study as a staff, and even having roundtables and discussions about those, building that base foundational knowledge so that when these emotions are flaring, we can kind of lean in with more curiosity, more understanding. And be more problem solvers rather than, making decisions with fear or worry or, all the things that inhibit us from making good decisions and productive decisions. Well, this one's just super cute, and I felt like I had to share it since Lori's an early childhood expert and talking about growing our executive function skills. This is just a phenomenal way, and you don't even necessarily need this book, but it engages younger children. Actually, I think my fifth graders would have gone bananas over this book. Sometimes I think I could share this with my college freshmen and sophomores, and they would like be really competitive about this. But
and Jennifer, you have to tell us what the book is, because we might have people listening in on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Remember 10 with Explorer Ben. And Ben is an outdoorsman, and he's going on all these different adventures in the mountains, in Antarctica. And he is very prepared, and he packs all of these things in his backpack, but then he meets some very naughty animals along the way. For instance, when he's in the jungle, a naughty monkey steals an item out of his pack. So you at first see a visual of 10 items, and it might have a silly song or a mnemonic that goes with each of the items. So you're teaching kids memory skills. And then one of those items disappears, and you're going to use that memory trigger, whether it be a mnemonic or a song or even a memory palace. So you've placed those items in a familiar place like your classroom or a bedroom, and see if you can recall what item or items are missing. So again, a way to grow that skill in a really fun and engaging way.
Love it. Love both of those resources, and I hope folks will consider checking those out, and our quick guide too. And if there are ways that we can help your staff with trainings, that is another area that we can give support if people are wanting that and ready for that too. For now, though, we have some free things to point folks in the direction of as well. So I have a blog post up for October of 2025. That would be the simplest way to find it on my blog at msjenalexander.com. It's all about giving some ideas about how we can support family members' working memory. And so there are a couple of downloads there for you. One of them, there's an explanation of how building wide, if some of our structures can be the same for our whole building, knowing different educators may use the same structure and how they, let's say, communicate with families, that could be really helpful. So if I'm a parent and I have 4 different kids in the building, and I've got 4 different teachers communicating in 4 different ways, different formats, and then I'm trying to figure out what they need to take to school on Monday or what forms to get into all the right places, but I have to find it in different spots for all 4 teachers. That's going to add overwhelm to any parent on any day, let alone someone who's already carrying perhaps a level of stress or trauma that's making that really difficult to navigate. And so if you can have some kind of a structure, a simplified structure that every teacher is going to use and then plug their information into the structure, it will make the rhythm of accessing information simpler for folks. So one structure might be the who, what, when, where. And so when you send a newsletter, when you send even a notice on social media, if you follow this structure, who's this for? What's it about? When do they need to focus on it? And where do they put the things, or where do they show up? And it follows that structure every time. That's going to be a support for folks in helping them access information and hang on to it on that mental sticky note too. So there's some examples of how to use that. Of course, you don't have to use that particular structure, but it's one example that the more we can be on the same page, the better it will be for families. We often think of it in terms of centering ourselves as educators sometimes, and what am I drawn to? What am I interested in? Or we want to change it up to be novel and creative, which has its place too. But we have to think about who's on the receiving end of that and what is making things easier for them instead. Another support that I created that is up on the blog is what I call the PB&J approach to communicating with family caregivers. So what does this mean? I have worked with many educators who have told me that they want to communicate more with families, or they want to have more effective communication with families that's compassionate and caring and productive to help learners, but they're not quite sure how to get started. So this is one of the ways that I help folks begin those conversations, to give them a structure around how they might communicate. So thinking about it as 2 pieces of bread with peanut butter and jelly in between. So you're going to start with a piece of bread, and the bread is start with something positive, something to celebrate. And then the P stands for either progress, like that's what you're going to discuss in the conversation, some kind of progress that you've seen, or how you're going to boost skills, or it could even be how you're going to boost support. So I might start the conversation and say, I just wanted to check in with you. I want to share with you that I've seen so much growth in your child in terms of their willingness to try new things in the classroom. I want to talk with you a little bit about the progress that we're seeing in terms of their letter identification. And I want to have some time to talk about how we can work together to keep that growth going. So that's all about the P and the B. And then you're going to go to the J, which is the joint solution. So how can we work together? What can the next steps be? And then we're going to end the conversation with more positives. So it's positives, progress, or boosting skills and support, and joint solutions, then even more positives at the end of that conversation. And having that structure, even having that visual in front of folks when you make that call or you write that email, or before you have that conversation face to face, which of course is best if you can help people frame that conversation and then guide it in a caring and compassionate way. I hope that you will check out these resources on the blog, consider the quick guide, share this show with other people, whether it's the podcast version or on YouTube, because there are lots of other educators who can benefit from this information too. In fact, we have 3 steps for you if you're interested in it. You can think of one thing you're going to change in how you communicate with caregivers to support their working memory. Take one of the resource ideas that we've shared here and check it out, and then share this show with another educator who can learn from our work too. that wraps up our topic for today. I'm so thankful, Jennifer, that you were here with us, and Lori, that you were here too. We all have things coming up on our plates, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. In the rest of October and into November, I will be doing quite a bit of coaching in Iowa, actually, along with Illinois trainings and some other ones too. And excitedly, coming up on November 5th, I will be with Lori at the Iowa Head Start Association conference on November 5th, and I will be presenting about trauma-sensitive learning environments in early childhood Head Start settings. So I hope you will consider joining us at the conference. Lori, is there kind of more you want to say about that?
Well, we're excited. We always have a lot of fun at our conferences, and we're excited that Miss Jen will be spending the entire day with us. The topic that she will be covering is the inside out of big behavior, trauma-sensitive skills and strategies for early childhood educators. And this will cover children birth to age 5, and really everyone's invited. You really don't have to be specific to early childhood, but teaching staff, parents, caregivers, support staff that work with children and families. I think it'll be a fun, engaging day, and it is going to be held at the FFA Enrichment Center, Event Center in Ankeny. And of course, we'll be providing snacks and lunch and coffee. We know how important food is at those events. So, absolutely. And anyone can go register. You can just go to our website, which is iowaheadstart.org, and just go to the trainings tab, and you can sign up right there. So we would love to see everyone's smiling faces in person. So.
Definitely. And I can't wait to be there with you and supporting all of the people who join us to participate. There will be lots of practical information and things that people can start implementing the very next day if they'd like to. Plus, one of my goals is always to just provide a supportive, safe place for us to be in community with one another, because that support for each other and ourselves matters a whole lot too. So I can't wait to do that. The date is November 5th. Go to the Iowa Head Start Association website to learn more and to register. We hope to see you there. And this is the rest of my crew. Just wanted to kind of show you all of us. Libby, Kelsey, and Jessica in the back, and then Megan, me, and Emily in the front. We are working hard behind the scenes and gearing up for fall PD and PD into the new year too. So for coming your way, know that we are looking forward to that. And it's such an honor to do this work with you of building trauma-sensitive learning environments that are not only good for kids, but they're good for all of us. And it's I couldn't think of work that's more important than what we get to do. So thank you for your part in what you do to care for the people you work with and for joining us in this work. I always like to end the show with a word. So Jennifer, Lori, people who are catching the show on YouTube in the comments, or even if you're listening in on the podcast, if there's one word that goes with our conversation today, what would it be? And I'm happy to start. My word is simple. That sometimes I'm really good at complicating things or adding a lot of words to things. And when it comes to executive function support, working memory support, the more we can simplify, be present, show up, lean in, acknowledge, and then help make the overwhelm a little bit simpler. It's really what it's all about. Simple. Jennifer, Lori, do you have a word?
I love your word.
Simple.
Simple is beautiful. Yeah. I think to add on to this, and you said this as well, curiosity, I think is a word that I would like to lead with and lean into. If we're feeling frustration, sometimes we can alleviate that a little bit by asking questions of ourselves even, but definitely of our students to help us problem solve with them, not for them, and giving them some ownership and empowering them to be a part of that process.
Simple curiosity. I love it. Lori, what do you want to add?
Just Inspired. I think that this is just a good reminder of how important it is as caregivers, as teachers, and just people who support families and children, how important it is to just come and listen to one of these, hour-long talks, or come to a training or watch a webinar, and just be inspired to make those little changes. Sometimes it just takes stepping away and maybe relearning, bringing things back up to the surface for us to be inspired to just keep moving forward and make little tweaks to what we're doing, maybe in the classroom, so we can just be the best that we can be for our children.
Yeah. And it really does come down to moments, doesn't it? There's these moments where we don't even think of them as crossroads, but they are, where we can like add to somebody's shame and overwhelm of the day, or we can help clear it up a little bit. Or even if we can't clear it up, we can at least be alongside somebody and not making it worse. And sometimes that makes all the difference when we're going through big stress, to be seen and met with compassion. It matters. Learn more on the blog, MsJenAlexander.com. I'm on all the social medias. Check it out there. Follow, like, and join the conversation. We want to connect with you. Thank you so much for being here. Lori, I just can't wait to see you at the conference soon. And Jennifer, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here. And please, everyone who is watching, take good care.